Hello and welcome to the Smart Divorce podcast. Today we're going to be talking all about experts and bringing experts into the divorce process. And I've got two fantastic guests with me this morning. My name's Tamsin Kane. I'm a financial planner who specialises in divorce. And I'm going to ask my guests to introduce themselves. So to begin with, Victoria Richardson. Hi, how are you?
Hi Tamsin, I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent.
I'm Victoria Richardson. I am a family partner at Aticus Law, specialising in divorce, financial matters and children.
Fabulous. Thank you for joining us today, Vicky. And I'm also joined by Maura McKibbin. Hi, Maura. How are you doing?
Hi, Tamsin. I'm good. It's Friday. That always means that I'm good. So I work on my own. So I have a practice called Maura McKibbin Mediation Limited. I am a family solicitor, but not practicing as a solicitor since 2007. I have worked exclusively helping people to problem solve around tables when they are separating. So I spend all of my time now working as a family mediator. I also work as a child inclusive mediator, so sometimes hearing the voice of children within parents' mediation processes. I'm trained as a family separation coach, and I am a member of the Resolution Parenting After Parting Committee. And on that committee, we spend a lot of time developing resources for family lawyers to help them support parents who are separating.
Fantastic. And there's lots of that I'm sure we can bring into today's conversation, a wide range of experience there. So I'm going to start with you, if that's okay, Vicky, and just ask you about how the process works and at what stage you would bring in an expert, whether that's a financial person, an emotional person, or even or a mediator, of course.
I think generally, to start off with, I would bring an expert in at any point during the case. So a client could come and see me at the initial interview, and it can be as early as that, where I feel that we need to bring some kind of expert in. For example, if they are particularly emotional, then I would tell them to seek counselling advice. If they are somebody who has been not used to using their own finances and completely unsure as to how to manage them in the future, then I would think about bringing a financial planner in at that stage so that they work with us as we go through the whole divorce process. If mediation is an issue, or if it's something that's likely to appeal to both parties and be successful, then also I would consider mediation at that stage and advise my client about the possibility of attending mediation, which I'm sure Maura will say more about later. As proceedings go through the process, it may well be that depending on the issues in the case, we have to bring other experts in. So, for example, in relation to sorting out financial matters, if the parties own a business and they are separating, then we might need an accountant to value the business. If there is a dispute about the value of the family home, we might need a surveyor to value the family home. We try and agree who those are going to be, who those experts are going to be. If they can't be agreed, the court will appoint a valuer if necessary. There are two ways of dealing with the division of financial issues. The first one is that the parties use family lawyers to reach an amicable agreement and the matter stays out of court, in which case we can still use experts to obtain the relevant information regarding the value of the assets. Or you need to apply to the court because either an agreement can't be reached, or you've just reached a stalemate, or one party is burying in their head in the sand a little bit and not responding to any information requests, in which case you can make an application to the court for the court to become involved. And at that stage, during certain court hearings, the court will appoint valuers, accountants, experts in order to obtain the appropriate information. And then once all the appropriate information and figures are obtained, it's then easier to negotiate a financial settlement. It's impossible to negotiate one without all the relevant information being in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that, because it's a bit like saying I'll give you half of what's in my bank account, but you've no idea whether I've got £5.50 or £1 million. You just need, as you say, all of the information. Maura, in terms of mediation, I think that I'd just like to start off with the initial question is, people get really confused about where to go first. It's like, should I go to a lawyer first? Should I go to a mediator first? Should I go to a financial person first? Should I go to a counsellor first? What's your view on where you should start?
I'm going to give that really annoying answer of it depends. I think it genuinely depends. And I think that the most important thing at the beginning is to get good information and lots of it. So it doesn't matter if you get that good information from a solicitor, it doesn't matter if you get that good information from a mediator or a financial planner, or anybody that specialises in helping families to separate, who's doing a lot of the work we do, understands that there need to be lots of different avenues for people to get stuff sorted out. So I don't think it matters where people start, as long as they're seeing a person who can give them lots of information, which is definitely what they need at the beginning, in order to then make informed decisions about where they set off. So if you take the analogy of just giving someone an ordnance survey map and saying, okay, off you go, actually it's not going to be enough. You need to be able to, they know what their destination is, which is to achieve a good separation for their family in every sense. But there are lots of different ways to get there, and depending on that person, you need to help them to know, well, which routes could you take? What do you need with you in your backpack as you're going? What's the support element? What do you need with you, and where are you heading? And you need to understand those people or that client in front of you. You need to deeply listen to what they're worried about, what their priorities are, what their relationship dynamic is and has been, what their kids need. So you've got to listen hard in order to help them to work out, okay, so do you need legal advice straight away, and do you even need court proceedings straight away? Because some people do, because they're in a really difficult situation. Or do you, or could you together sit down and be helped to sort this stuff out with support? And then actually from there you're looking at, and it is the presentation I sometimes give to clients who are chatting to me is, if you've got to have an operation, you need a team of people. You don't just have your surgeon. You need nurses. You need people to put you in at the hospital. You need your surgeon. You need your anaesthetist. You need your aftercare specialist. So separation is a team effort. And I think that's what we really need to make clear to clients. And I don't think it matters when they start the journey, because they get the right information from someone in that team.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it really did. I have a question that's kind of comes up to me quite a lot, is about how can mediation help people who are separating? Because I think there's a bit of there's a confusion around the general public as to what actually mediation is and how it can help people. And I know it can really, really help, but I think it would be really good if you could just put a bit of meat on the bones about what the process is in mediation and how it can help.
Yeah, sure. So I think importantly, before I get to that, it's important to say that mediation doesn't help everybody. So it's one of a range of options, and it's brilliant for some people, and it would not be good for other people. So it really isn't a one size fits all. It's getting people to the right place. But mediation is what I would describe as a problem solving process. So whether you're talking as parents or talking about your financial separation, or sometimes both, it is about deep problem solving. And you do that by working mostly round a table. You are helped by the mediator to prepare, to know what to prepare, what to bring, how to get yourself ready to have the conversations you're going to have. You have those conversations across a series of meetings, and alongside those conversations, you can access understanding from your solicitors about, well, how would the court deal with a case like ours? Like, what would a judge do with us, or what would be the range of likely outcomes for us? So you need legal advice. But actually, round a table, as well as having that legal advice in your head and having that understanding, you are looking at feelings of fairness about how stuff gets sorted out. You're looking at, on finances, you're looking at the maths of how things get sorted out. And you are looking at different options and working out, well, if we did this, could that feel fair to you? Would that feel okay for me? Or if we did it this way, what would that be like? Would that work on the maths? And it is a team effort in mediation. So, you need financial advice, you need legal advice. People need all sorts of support emotionally. But it is essentially about reorganizing family life together by problem solving. That's what I would say it is. And it is your solicitors who help you at the end get something that's legally binding. So your outcome is exactly the same, i.e. you have your certainty, you have your legal certainty in terms of court orders and things, but the way you get there is very different. So solicitors' roles are different when people are mediating. They're not writing letters, that they stand down their letter writing, negotiating piece, and they are advisory and drafting. And instead of all the letters, people are being supported to talk. So that's how I describe it. But problem solving is the key. You need to be willing to do three things if you're mediating. You need to be willing to both come to mediation. You need to be willing to both enter into problem solving and negotiating and churning out ideas and different options. You need to be willing to compromise. So if you're willing to do all those three things, you're comfortable to work in that problem-solving environment, then mediation could be a good option.
Fantastic. And I guess when we decided who we were inviting along to this podcast to have a conversation about experts, I kind of hadn't sort of thought. I'd thought of Vicky's referring to yourself as a mediator, but I guess I hadn't thought of it the other way around. Is that something that happens quite often, Vicky?
It does actually. It's certainly a two-way process. I will refer clients to Maura and say these parties, are good prospects for mediation, and she will assess them appropriately. And, very often they'll come back to me later on down the line with, this is what we've agreed. And I think at the moment in particular, because there are such long waiting lists, if you have to go through the court process, it's a very good option, that we try and sell as much as possible to our clients. It's always better if they can reach something amicably between themselves with a mediator. It's quicker, it works out cheaper for them. So it's a very, very good option. Obviously, it's not appropriate for everybody, and certainly where there's domestic abuse cases, it isn't. But there are also mediators, and I don't know whether Maura, you're one of them, who do shuttle mediation, whereby the parties aren't happy to sit in the same room as each other because they just don't feel comfortable, but they would sit in separate rooms and still enter the mediation process.
Yeah.
But yes, certainly. It comes back to us later down the line when the parties have reached an agreement, and our job then is to draw that up into a financial legal agreement, which is approved by the court, and everybody moves on.
Yeah, and I think just to sort of jump in there, Vicky, I think it's good to mention the different ways that you can sit round tables, because you can sit round tables with your solicitors in a round table meeting. You can sit round tables with a mediator. You can sit round different tables with a mediator shuttling between the two rooms. And there are circumstances where that's just going to be a better option for some people. You can integrate solicitors into that shuttle arrangement, which, I mean, there are lots of labels. I think they're all really confusing for clients. But the reality is, if a clients are sitting separately to mediate, and one of them would feel really reassured by having their solicitor with them to get their advice on the spot as part of that shuttle arrangement, sometimes both clients, then that can be a super way of helping people to sort stuff out. And that's not necessary at every meeting, but there'll be key meetings where if you can integrate the legal advice and clients are sitting in different rooms, that can be really good. So there's lots of flexibility, and that's why I think the important thing at the beginning is to listen really hard to what people are worried about, what feels important to them, so that you can offer them the best fit. And I think as professionals, we love labels. We give every process a label. Clients just want to be helped, don't they? And they're not so worried about what things are called. I think it can be quite overwhelming, but we know how to put the building blocks together for them because of our experience. And same for you, Tamsin. I mean, you know when your bit would add value, where you need to come in. So it's our job as the team of professionals to work out what clients need, when, who they need to see when.
I, for example, had a great mediation just before Christmas. Both parties were legally represented, but they were so far apart from terms of financial settlement, but both reluctant in a way to engage in the court process because they knew how long it would take, and it felt like we'd been in negotiations for probably a couple of years anyway. So they both agreed to go into mediation with their respective solicitors, and it took all day, and it was everyone was exhausted. But by the end of it, we had an agreement, and that would still be going through court now. That would probably be 9 to 12 months to go through the court process. We did it in a day with a mediator who went between the two of us, and then we went round the table to discuss any options and hammed it out, as they say. But yes, it was very successful. So it worked, as you said, Maura, there are so many different ways of doing it. If we do have plenty of clients who feel that they need the support of a solicitor or financial planner with them, just to make sure that they are making the right decision, because it can be quite overwhelming for people.
Yeah, it can. And I think as well that what I think probably doesn't happen enough either is that sometimes people need emotional support in order to either be helped through a solicitor-led process or be helped through mediation. And sometimes people need emotional support and preparation before they can even begin to start any sorting out. So actually helping people to work with parenting coaches or with therapists in order to allow them to move through part of the emotional recovery journey, because very early in the emotional recovery journey there can be a lot of strong emotion. Yeah, and there's a lot of strong emotion, including fear. Fear is a massive emotion in separation, and sometimes for people it's overwhelming, the thought of going in to see a solicitor or going to sit in mediation. It's terrifying. So actually there's a massive part to play. I think therapists, parenting coaches can help people enormously as part of the journey of being able to engage fully in a process of sorting stuff out.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. How on earth somebody can make life-changing financial decisions when they're emotionally supercharged is beyond me. And I think it's almost that should be the starting point, is actually we should perhaps be looking at and I know people want to gather information, and as you said, Maura, I think that's really, really important, but I do think the first step is almost right, let's go and see a lawyer or a mediator. And actually perhaps the best starting point is more going to see somebody who can emotionally support you to almost remove that.
I've had numerous clients where I've said to them, I can't help you yet. I need you to go and get some really intense counselling, because whatever I say to you is going to go in one ear and out the other. You're not able to emotionally process it yet, and come back, because you're in obviously it depends on the client, but they're in no great rush to deal with anything immediately. So just go away and come back. And they do. And you see them getting better and stronger as you go through the process. More often than not, I send clients off and I say, come back in a few weeks when you've had some intense counselling, and bring somebody with you, so that you have two sets of ears. And I suppose they're experts in their own way, whether they be a mother, a father, brother, sister, because they provide the emotional support and the practical ears really for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that family support, it sort of takes you to like that hospital scenario that Maura was talking about before, where you need a team of different people around you, and if a doctor is delivering some very serious news to somebody about an illness they have, they do normally suggest to bring someone with you, because you can't take on all of the information if you're in a heightened emotional state. So I think that's really good advice, and I don't know of any professional working in divorce who wouldn't be more than happy to have another person with them if that's what the client wanted. So I think that's absolutely spot on. We've kind of talked about this team of people, and whether we're working in mediation or we're doing the whole process through solicitors, we have got this team, and I think it's important for us to deal with the elephant in the room, which is all around cost, because that's a huge concern when people are going through divorce. What's your experience, Maura, in terms of bringing other experts in? We've talked about this team, and whether that ends up leading to a much greater cost for the client.
Yeah, I think I can answer that quite simply. I don't think it brings extra costs for the client, because we're doing different things as a team of people to help the client. We're not doing the same thing. So, for example, if I've got clients who are going through a financial separation process, I will work in conjunction with for someone who's financially specialised, because the main job they're doing in that process is a financial job. Yes, there are legal aspects to it. Yes, there are emotional aspects to it, but the figure, understanding the figures, crunching the figures, looking at the options, looking at the financial consequences. So it's not going to be me that specifically does some of that work, because that's not my expert area, and I need someone financial to co-work with me. So I will be sending clients, I'll get them to a point, then I'm going to be sending them off to someone I know and trust, and I know what that work that person's going to be doing with them. So I know where my line ends and their line starts. So actually we're suitably dovetailing people from one place to the next with care, and actually with a lot of understanding, because you don't want people to feel like they're being passed from pillar to post, and you don't want them to worry. Actually, there are loads of people and there's loads of costs. So actually, it's all about talking to people about cost. It's about making it really simple, and we can do that. We can easily make it simple to tell them, well, this is how this bit's going to work, and this is how the costs of this are going to work, and that. So it's about how we communicate with people about cost. So I know there's a big worry about cost. You can't separate without spending money on your separation, but in fact, it's about helping people to get the help they need cost effectively at the time they need it. And I think we're really well placed to help them to do that, and to offer them reassurance about how much it's going to cost. And when I'm working with people, and actually when I send out information about costs in my note, I say to people, if you want to keep costs down for my process, for mediation, you need to do what I'm asking you to do. You need to prepare the stuff I asked you to prepare. You need to have it done in time. You need to send it in to me so I've got time to have a look at it before our meeting. And so we're all in this together on keeping costs down. I'll do my bit, you do your bit, and I'll help you to know what that is. So yeah, people need a lot of reassurance. People are terrified about costs, absolutely terrified, but they need to get through and out of the other side. And so there is a way to do that. I think from experience as a solicitor, and I worked for a long time as a solicitor like Vicky, and I say this to clients now in mediation, where costs spiral out of control, it is very often the case that there is high emotion in that case, a lot of high emotion. And so actually going back to the point about how do you help people emotionally to cope better with separation so you can do your work with them, that's key, I think, to helping people, because you need to not take all your emotion as a client. You can't avoid having lots of emotion. You're separating, it's normal, but you need to not take all of that emotion into your solicitor's office, because actually that's not going to be the most cost-effective place for you to get that help, and that's not the right place, that's not the right area. I mean, your solicitor can help you because they will be empathetic and caring and experienced at helping people through emotional process, but Their skill set is helping you with the legal bits. And the therapist or the coach, their skill set is to help you to cope better with the emotion. And your solicitor will work better with you if you're coping better. So it is, clients have a lot on their plates, a lot. And but I think we've got the expertise to help people to be in the right place at the right time with the right expert, with the right person helping them, and that will make it the most cost-effective way through.
Yeah, absolutely.
What Maura says, and I think if you start from the beginning to explain to clients, and I do exactly the same as Maura, that the more you cooperate both with what's asked from you by me, by the court, by the other side, that will keep your costs down, because we charge on how much time is spent on your file as far as possible. So the less time that we have to spend, the better, and the time that we're spending needs to be productive. So that's one way. And I also, with the cost estimate, explain to clients that should include as well disbursements, which are your expert fees. So from quite early on the initial meeting, I will have an idea as to what experts I will need. So, whether mortgage advisors, for example, you can just send to clients separately and their fees can be relatively small, but there may be important accountant information that's required, or an actuary. And I have an idea already how much that will cost when parties need to instruct one of those. So it's all about being realistic. I give clients an idea as to what it will cost, and then I also say to them, nobody, for example, paid for a wedding for £20,000 by just handing a cheque over. You pay it by instalments, and you set up as much direct debits for what you can. There is litigation funding available in quite a lot of cases whereby we get funded and then you pay it back. So there are ways and means of funding your case. And I think a lot of people probably don't realise how they're paying their fees until the end, if they just pay something monthly and trying to keep up to date with it. But there is a lot that clients can do, and we try obviously and use those experts who we know are very reasonable with their costs and will deliver on time, because that's important.
Yeah, and I was going to just flip it round to ask you a question, Tamsin, because you obviously, it's your absolute bread and butter to be helping clients gather information together financially and to be able to share understanding, enhance knowledge and understanding around that for both people, which is so for you, that's the most cost effective. You are the person that knows how to do that, to do it in the quickest way and the easiest way, and therefore the cheapest way. So from your perspective, can you talk a little bit about that, because that would be helpful as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're brought in as financial planners by lawyers and mediators all at all sorts of different stages during the process. And I think traditionally financial advisors have been used right at the end of the process. So once the divorce is done, the financial consent orders are sorted, you've got your pension sharing order, and there's something to implement. So a pension needs to be brought from one person to another person, for example. That's kind of traditionally where we come in. From my perspective, I prefer to start working with people right at the beginning of the process, because I think that's where we can add the most value. As you say, Maura, we look at financial information, people's costs, people's expenditures every single day of every single year, because that is our bread and butter. And we can also help people to understand their complicated products that they've got. So pensions, which blow most people's minds, those are something that I look at every single day, and I can hopefully explain what they are jargon free as possible, and go through them and explain what they do and how they work and so on, and hopefully demystify them a little bit. So from my perspective, I can work with people right from the beginning of the process, help them to pull their income, expenditure, assets, liabilities together, so that information's clear to the mediator or to the solicitor that they're working with. And we would work with them all the way from there right until the end of the process. And I think you're absolutely right in that if everybody's working to their own skill set, then I actually think it can be a lot cheaper to work with a team of people, because each person is doing the things that they're best at. And when you get to the end of it, you're likely to have a much clearer position, and you're likely to, and if it, without wanting to suggest that people are rushing it, but I think actually it can work much more quickly, as certainly because the court process is quite protracted at the minute, with the courts being so full as well.
I do try and say I have a lot of clients who will say to me, oh, I can't afford a financial planner, that, you know, this is going to cost me a fortune, I can't. But, you know, more often than not, I will say to typically wives, for example, who don't have the financial head, husbands always dealt with the financial issues, you can't afford not to, you know, and a good financial planner will help them from day one get all their information together. Otherwise, I've got to do it. So you're not duplicating costs in that respect, and move forward with the process and help them find the best deals for them, and also plan their life moving forward. And, you know, we need to know from financial planners what a client's future looks like. Can they afford to live on the spousal maintenance that they are going to receive? Can they afford to buy another property? What is their mortgage capacity going to be? So, you know, quite a lot of cases, they can't afford not to have them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested, what do you do when a client refuses to take your advice on needing an expert? Because, you know, I quite often come across clients who have and this is the one that seems to occur more often than not, is around getting a pension on divorce expert report. Or so they're not necessarily in the court process, but they're like, oh, we don't need one of those. How do you go about dealing with that? I'll start with you, Vicky.
Obviously it depends on whereabouts you are in the process. So it's certainly not unusual for me to be advised by clients, we don't need that because she's not getting any of my pension, which is for me to manage. But other times you come back to readdress it. So initially they will say no, and then you say, okay, I'll leave that for now. But then further down the line, you'll come back to readdress it again. And it's our job to give advice. Yeah. And it's my job to obviously act on instructions as well. And ultimately, if they don't want to instruct an actuary to obtain a pension report, the other side are going to make an application to the court where the court's going to order one, and they will have no say in that process. They will increase their legal fees. It will take longer to sort out. So it's the way you advise your client, and hopefully our job is to tell them that that's what they need and they listen. If they really don't want to listen, well, there's an issue as to whether you want to continue to act for them if they come for advice and they're not prepared to listen to what you're saying because they're just wasting money.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that a situation you've come across, Maura?
It's less likely, I think, in a mediation process if people are working cooperatively together, because I think once they've got an understanding, and that might be from, so for instance, to take the pension aspect, which is the one you've given the example of, and it's a really good one, because they're often assets that people don't really look at their pensions on a regular basis. They don't always understand what their pension products are. And also, particularly on separation, there are things to know about pensions, about pensions and separation that's really important. So I think in a mediation setting, I think it's less likely to occur that someone would dig their heels in that way. One of the things I try to do early is to link people up with a financial expert for nothing more than a sort of broad chat about the relevance of pensions on separation, different types of pensions, and the stuff that crops up. Because actually, if you can give people understanding of why pensions are important, I think that they're more likely to engage with conversations and sorting out and looking at it with someone. I mean, there will always be circumstances, they're probably much more in your office, Vicky, than in mine, but there are always been circumstances where people can be bolshy and just say, well, I'm not giving disclosure about that because they're not having anything, or you know, people can be defensive or cross, or all sorts of emotions in separation, and if I get that scenario in a mediation, because I'm not giving legal advice, what I will always say to those people is, right, well, I've heard everything you've said about it. I'm going to do a detailed note about it. That note's going to go back to your solicitors, and I want you to take their legal advice, both of you, from your separate solicitors about what conversations you've had and how they want to advise you to move forward. Because if I don't have cooperative people working in mediation, I won't be working with them. The mediation will fail. So it goes back to, you know, Vicky's office for one client, and the other person take it back to their solicitor for advice. Because what I will say to clients, if someone's not really willing to open up and consider what they need to consider on pensions, is, look, your solicitors are going to make you sign a disclaimer, because they can't work with you unless there's full knowledge around all of the assets. So if there isn't, then they're either not going to be working with you, or you're going to be working with them with a disclaimer saying they haven't been able to give full legal advice, because either they don't have your information or they don't have the other person's information in order to properly understand the financial scenario.
Yeah,
so it does
absolutely.
present problems. It can present problems.
And I think this, in a way, goes back to costs again, doesn't it? Because if you're being advised to instruct an expert because they're going to be able to provide information that is required in the process, if you keep saying no, actually, it could then inflame the costs, because you may have solicitors' letters needing to go back and forward, which obviously there's a cost. And in the end, if you're trying to go through a mediation process, or having your lawyers negotiate between them, if they can't get you to agree to get the information, such as a pensions report, that may end up in court, and then again the costs will end up being bigger. Vicky, we often hear about, well, I say often, I mean, I think we often hear about it just because these things tend to get tweeted when they you know, get out of control, but we do hear about cases where each party is perhaps spending kind of six figures on the legal process of getting divorced. What things would you suggest that people might be able to do to not go to that extent in terms of costs?
I think it's really important what Maura said earlier, in that costs tend to spiral out of control when emotion is involved, you know, because costs increase when solicitors, for example, are writing letters backwards and forwards, and that tends to be because our clients instruct us to respond to what the other party say in an aggressive way. And she didn't say, you know, they shouldn't say this, that's not right, we need to do that. And it's quite often solicitors allow costs to increase and correspondence going backwards and forwards, and no progress is being made. And I think it's really important to explain that to clients and say, look, we can write all the letters you want, I can write all the letters you want me to write to a certain extent, because there are certain letters in certain tones that I'm not prepared to go there with. But ultimately you're going nowhere, and you're just going to increase your costs. So I think it's important from day one spell out to my clients that let's try and take the emotion out of this. I'm not going to respond to every single letter. I will respond to what I think is appropriate, and I'll respond in a way that moves things forward. There sometimes comes a point in cases whereby, for example, mediation is not appropriate. You have sent several letters to the other side and you're not getting really anywhere constructive, that I will then send to clients. It seems like an acrimonious way of dealing things, but I think we need to apply to the court, and that is to get it on a timetable, because both parties have to do certain things by certain dates, and it has to be dealt with. And yes, costs can increase by going to court, because in some occasions you're replicating information that's already been produced, but in other ways it moves things on quicker, because people have to focus, and it stops wasting costs from one side to the other. But certainly the more you can agree and be civil, I don't expect people to be amicable when they're in this situation, but civil and respectful to each other will certainly bring your costs down immediately. Even such things as, do we really need a surveyor to value the family home, or can you liaise and arrange for 3 estate agents to come round and value the property? It's such items like that. There are always going to be, in asset cases, experts that you need you know, accountants, financial planners, pension experts, because the parties wouldn't be able to agree with that themselves. But there are also other ones that the parties can liaise about and keep their costs down as a result.
Fantastic. Ladies, sadly, we're coming to the end of our time together. I'm not really quite sure how that's happened so rapidly. But I wondered if either of you just had any final advice or tips for our listeners. Maura, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, so my tip is really about team working. So I think when we talked at the beginning about where can people access information to know where they're heading, how they're going to sort things out, who's going to help them, I think it is really important for people to have this clear message of I'm going to need a team of people to help me. So that might be a parenting coach to understand the impact of this on our kids. It might be a financial coach or expert to help me better understand how the finances look. It might be some therapy support for me as an individual to help me to move through all of the different emotional stages of separation. It might be my solicitor, it might be a mediator at certain points to help us to have conversations together. So it's to get that team in place so that you can be helped and supported to work through family separation in the least painful, least damaging way to your family. Because and I think actually to think about as well how you move through this whole sorting out process as time efficiently as possible, because being in limbo is really bad for separating families. The uncertainty is crippling and the fear is crippling. So yeah, get your team in place, find someone to help you early to give you lots of good information so you can make good choices for your separating family.
Fantastic advice. Follow that, Vicky.
Sounds in, to be honest. I think Maura said it all very succinctly. I would say to anyone who's going through this process, trust us. We will not bring in experts unless we think that it's going to add value to your case. We will only deal with we're not going to deal with every single expert. There are only going to be a couple of experts that is appropriate to your case. And by letting us do that, we'll actually reduce your costs and reach a solution quicker.
Fantastic. That is brilliant advice. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for listening. And please join us again for our next episode.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.